ladies and gentlemen. We're so glad to welcome you as part of our community tonight. Please note that this webinar is being recorded and distributed live stream. By entering this virtual meeting room, you give your consent to be recorded and distributed by Simeon Morrow Public Speaking Presentations, Vienna Live with Simeon Morrow, and other third parties. If you prefer to not be recorded, please turn off your microphone and or camera and or go to the Facebook Live video feed, the link to which I'll now place in the chat room. For a better experience, please turn off your microphone and set your video to gallery view. This show thrives on participant contributions, and all participants are encouraged to actively participate in this webinar by asking questions and making comments. To do so, please either write in the chat room, raise your hand, turn on your microphone, say hi, and I'll be delighted to include your perspective in the conversation. Tonight, our featured guest is Amelie Kreiter, an intercultural trainer who joins us from Detroit, Michigan. Amelie, welcome.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Amelie, so can you tell us a little bit about, yourself and your journey to becoming an intercultural trainer?
Well, yeah, I guess my journey started when I was born. My mom held me first in her hands and she thought this baby's not going to stay. And through my whole childhood, I was very adventurous. I loved to meet people, talk to different people, and was very curious. And the older I got, the more I wanted to know about other countries, different cultures, languages. That's why I opted to have at school French, Spanish, and English. And with 16, I did my first backpacking trip all alone. And with 21, I moved from Austria to Spain and worked there for a hotel chain. But my goal always was to travel and basically explore and see the world and different societies. So when I had the chance to start at Lufthansa in Germany, I moved from Spain to Germany. And I had the chance to really travel and see the whole world, get in touch with myriads of people with different cultures. I learned more languages to better communicate with them. And I know at some point I had this feeling I needed more detailed knowledge, more thorough knowledge, more theoretical concepts. This is when I went to study sociology at the University of Austria, and then went into my master's in intercultural study, focusing on business. And 7 years ago, my journey led me to the US, to Detroit, Michigan. And I started my business as an intercultural trainer and consultant.
Fantastic. So tell us a little bit about the definitions. When you told me, when we first spoke about intercultural training, I thought it only had to do with communication, but you told me, no, it's communication is one aspect. Like, as you mentioned, you were learning all those languages to communicate better with people, but it's not the only aspect. Can you tell us a little bit, for those of us who are not like me, who don't really know what intercultural training is, tell us a little bit about your definition and what it means.
I mean, maybe first we should go into what is culture, because many times culture is just, for many people, it's like arts or music and or traditions, and that's it. But the important thing is really to acknowledge everything, what we do, what we are, how we think, our reasoning styles, how we perceive and see the world. Is everything culture? To put it simple, it's like as if everybody of us is viewing the world through cultural lenses. So in intercultural training, we live in a globalized world, right? And it's necessary and essential to develop a global mindset. And this is the aim of an intercultural training, that participants start their journey in being self-reflexive on their own culture, on their own cultural values, develop an openness, learn about other cultures, and then being able to really implement different values and different perspectives into their not only work life, but also private life. And this is what intercultural training does. And it's all about intercultural competency. And this is a lifelong journey. You don't go to a training and you're done. I studied it, and it's a lifelong learning process because cultures constantly change. And this is what an intercultural training does, that people after that also have this awareness of the differences, but also the opportunities those differences provide.
Fantastic. And tell us about these aspects we talked about. We talked about one aspect, as I mentioned before, a big aspect is communication. If you don't open your mouth, then you can communicate other ways. But generally speaking, today in society, we tend to use eloquent language or writing to communicate precise thoughts with other people. So that's one. And then also, then there are different business cultures. If you go to India, they do business differently than they do in the United States, differently than they do in Mexico or Germany. And then you also said that intercultural training has to do with working with the families who are going to go to a different country to do business there. And that has a lot of you have to help them make these adjustments, because otherwise they just feel completely lost. They don't know they feel unmoored. They're not able to really fully participate in the culture because they don't understand it, I guess. And then even you mentioned the kids, they become kind of in between. Their kids will become third culture kids. They're not really of one or the other. And then lastly, told us, you and I talked about this idea of roots of culture, looking at the history of a given nation or given culture really helps us understand where those traditions, as you say, that culture comes from. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, roots of culture is usually the first part I do. I mean, there is two different ways of intercultural training or forms I deliver. One is a culture-specific training, and the other one is a culture general. And if it's a culture-specific training, then I would really start with the roots of culture, the history of the country, usually of the host country. But again, very important to reflect on the own country, I always tell people in the beginning, we are the sum of the history of our ancestors. And this is what makes societies, what creates certain habits, value systems, traditions in a society. And it's very important not only knowing, oh, how is it in the host country, but also know why you do certain things, why you perceive certain things as appropriate, non-appropriate. This all is rooted in those roots of culture. And so this is a very important aspect. And for example, I mean, you're from the US. When people come to the US, many times they don't know, oh, why is it so important, this egalitarian system? We are all equals. We don't like hierarchy. And it's deeply rooted in the first settlers. They fled Europe. They fled the hierarchical system in Europe. They didn't want a pope. They didn't want a priest that read to them. They wanted to read the Bible on their own. They wanted to have their own life and being master of their destiny. And this is such a deeply rooted cultural value. And this is why freedom in the US is such an important aspect. And if you see, you relate this back to the first settlers. And in every society, we have our historical facts that shaped us as a culture, as a society. And it's very important to talk about that because it influences how I do business. I mean, the first settlers, again, they came and it was a vast land. They didn't know what was going to happen. They needed to be daredevils. They needed trial and error. And still, trial and error is a fundamental principle in the US, especially in the workplace. Whereas if you would go to Germany, trial and error is not a thing. If you fail, you didn't do the math. So a total different approach, but only rooted in all the history. So that's why this is such an important aspect, I would say.
And Amelie, so you're saying that generally, in order to start intercultural training, you have your clients look at themselves and where they come from first, so that they become aware of, first of all, their own culture and why they make certain decisions. And becoming aware of your own culture, then you can see how that compares to others. Is that right?
Yeah, because we perceive people and things they do in a certain way, but only because our socialization tells us what is appropriate, how to get things done, right? And in that moment, somebody does it in a different way. We right away go into this stereotyping, prejudice, and bias, right? And it's so prevalent. And this is what then makes us judge people. And we even go that far that we would say it's a bad intention. But the important thing is, it's with cultures, it's not about being right or wrong. It's not about being good or bad. It's about being different from. And real intercultural competency is go to the limits and see even things you would say, okay, this is a no-go for me. But as soon as you know the background, you can actively choose. You have even a choice to say, oh, maybe I should give this a try. And I mean, I lived in so many different countries. I met so many different people. I changed a lot over the years, and I like many things a lot in the US, especially in the workplace. And I adapted this into my mindset. And I think this is what it's about. And it's not about assimilation, because this used to be a big factor. You know, when immigrants came to a place, it was about assimilation. Now we know assimilation is not what we want, because this is somehow you need to lose yourself. You need to lose your cultural identity. And this is not what it's about. It's about being capable in taking on and trying new things in order to get more complex. And I think this is what it's about.
Fantastic. And so, Amelie, so tell us more about that culture you're talking about, doing business in the US, for example, as opposed to a Latin American country. So this idea you talked to, when we were talking before, you told me about how in the US, you're not supposed to hire your wife to work with you, because that would entail that you had some kind of nepotism. It was a nepotism behavior, as opposed to what they call, I think, arm's length transactions, so that you're dealing purely with other people that have no familial ties, even though clearly that's kind of impossible, not to take on people that you have some kind of affinity with. You're not going to take on somebody who's a complete stranger who you disagree with. But tell us about then, in a different country in Latin America, then it's very common for people to hire their people from their family, and that, as you mentioned, that's okay. That's not necessarily, or that means it's nepotism, but that doesn't mean that nepotism is necessarily bad.
And this is a good thing. This is a good observation. Now we see already the definition of a word. Yes, it is nepotism, but what does nepotism mean to you doesn't mean the same thing for people from a different cultural background. And we always have to, and this again goes back to roots of culture. I have to look at a country. I have to look at the law system. I have to look at law enforcement. I have to look at political stability, right? In the US, it's very simple, right? I mean, if somebody betrays me in the workplace, I have a very good functioning system that operates for me. The less stable a country is politically, the more you need trust. The US is a very transactional country, because people in the US can allow it to themselves being a transactional. In other countries, it is like that. I want to know with who am I dealing with? And I would ask, okay, who are you related to? Who do I know, in order to find out more? And this means that people in the workplace are used to establish trust with their work peers. They need to trust each other. And this also means to find out more about each other privately, which in the US is not a thing, right? I can go to work and I set up my coffee mug and I only say hi and goodbye, but I still have a good work relationship and we are productive because we are protected. The less protected people are, the more they need to know. And then what's happening is, okay, if I hire my cousin, I know what I will get and who I will get. So we see nepotism can be seen as something positive and as something negative at the same time. But we need to know, because when I go to a country where nepotism is a thing to do, and I don't know about it, I would judge people from my perspective, from my cultural view on the thing. And this is why it's so important. As well, when you go into leadership, team building, what is a team, right? What is a team in the US is not the same as in Germany, as in Spain, as in Hong Kong. there is so many expectations, and we have our cultural imprinted expectations. If I tell you what is an office, in the Western world, many people will say right away, well, there is a desk, there is a computer, there is this, and this. And we all agree, okay, this is an office. If I go to Africa and ask somebody what is an office, we would get a total different picture. And I think this is the important thing. And also when it comes to leadership. I mean, the US is a very egalitarian country. What American people expect from a leader is totally different as it is in a more collectivist society, like in China, Japan. And this is the thing, right? And when somebody got sent in a position, in a leadership position in a different country, it doesn't mean because I'm a good manager in the US, I'm not necessarily a good manager in China. But you can learn this. That's what the doing business aspect is about.
Fantastic. Wow. So we're going to get more into that in a little bit. First, I want us to go into this idea of what that means in the real world, because theoretically that all sounds like, oh yeah, no one will disagree with that. Tell us about the real world cases what happens. Tell us a little bit of these case studies that have happened that have kind of gone for the worse because these large multinational companies didn't do their intercultural training.
Yeah, I mean, I think one great example is when Walmart moved into Germany. And I mean, it was pretty simple. We are the biggest and the most successful retailer in the US. And we just go to Germany because people will love it. What they didn't think about so much was really doing a thorough research, customer research. What do German people want to buy where? And I mean, in Germany, generally, people are very specialized in everything when it comes to education, as well as what to buy where. Germans still, not as much as they used to be, but still go to a butcher to buy the meat. They go to a bakery to buy the bread. And when Walmart moved into Germany, generally people don't want to buy the underwear where they buy the milk, or they don't need to buy the winter tires where they buy the milk. So what happened was they didn't do customer research, and with all this employee of the month and rollback pricing, all of that, people just didn't react in the way Walmart expected it to be, and they had to withdraw. So and it was like $1 million failure. They withdrew from Germany. And I just read an article about the same thing with Target in Canada. Target in Canada is not successful. And you would think, oh, they speak English too, or French, but they border with the US. You would think, oh, yeah, they are probably in many things alike. They like the same things. But Target is not as successful in Canada as it is in the US.
So,
yeah.
Amelie, and tell us what if you have these a company like Walmart, I think the second largest employer in the United States, only second to the United States military.
Yeah.
I mean, with this kind of power, economic power and clout, when you say they pulled out completely of Germany, couldn't it be due to many more factors just than lack of intercultural training? Or what is it that tell us a little bit more about, okay, besides that Germans, they want to buy their meat and their underwear at separate stores. Tell us a little bit about, is it larger than that? Is it a larger idea that they were already buying at different stores, or why is that? Can you go more into a little of that reasoning?
I think, there is never only one factor, but many times you find that one factor is not enough focus on the cultural aspects. And I mean, we speak about marketing here, right? I mean, I told you about Ford Galaxy, Volkswagen Charan, and Seat Alhambra. I mean, those are basically the three same cars. Sorry for all the car manufacturers. I know they are not the same, but it's the same platform. And basically it is a minivan. And if you look at research, like in Europe, the Anglo-Saxon countries, they buy the Ford Galaxy because it's American, It has this galaxy. This is, the Anglo-Saxon background. The Germans buy the Volkswagen Charan. And in the south of Europe, they rather stick with the Seat Alhambra. And this is what culture does, right? And in marketing, it's the same thing. Generally, it might have been many other factors, but you know what is interesting? The same happened to Gap too. Gap withdrew from Germany. So yes, I mean everything, and there was, especially after World War II, and especially in the areas where a lot of Americans were in the south of Germany and Austria. I mean, everything American was great. People embraced it, and they still embrace it, right? But to think that we know what and who Americans are, because we know from music, TV, movies, there is so much beyond that. We only see the tip of the iceberg when we look at the culture. And the same thing is in Germany, right? It's not only a lack of intercultural competency, what happened with Walmart, but it was a reason. They could have adapted. And here we are with those hegemonial structures, like the powerful cultures, right? And this is, we are the leading cultures. We know how the world works, and everybody would want it. And this was a lot the American way, right? In that aspect. And if they would have adapted more to what German customers would have wanted, might have been a different thing. I don't say it wouldn't have happened, but I'm sure it would have been a different thing.
So Amelie, let's just pretend for a minute then I'm the chief executive of Walmart. What do you tell me? I say I'm having these problems in Germany right now. How do I solve these problems interculturally?
If you were the CEO of Walmart, oh man. Okay, first of all, I think what is also interesting is if I open Walmart in Germany, I will have German people working there. This is the number one thing. And you cannot go there and say, okay, this is our corporate culture, this is how it works, and this is how you do it. You have to look, what are German employees expecting? What are German salespeople? Because they have a very thorough apprenticeship. If you are a salesperson in Germany, you go 3 years on the job training and in school training to become a salesperson. So you really need to explain people and see where they are coming from. This is one thing. I mean, one thing is the workforce. The other thing is the customer. And you have to really look at, what does a customer want? I mean, you cannot change Walmart as a concept, right? You cannot say, okay, we don't sell car tires anymore because Germans don't want it. I think it's really about, and if I could have told this person from Walmart, oh man, where would I be now? But this is really what it's about, to look, what are people expecting from me, and not trying to push my culture on the other culture.
Wow.
And I think this is basically what happened.
Wow, very impressive. So I hope Walmart is listening. One other question quickly then about Amazon. I understand that they have taken over Europe in the past 5 or 10 years, and they seem to be very successful, even though they act in, it seems like, a predatory way, that they're really going after all these countries in Eastern Europe. They're really fighting, or more or less competing directly with the national post services of those countries. Are they being successful? And if so, is it because they have really co-opted this intercultural training point of view?
Oh, I don't think that Amazon has anything to do with the intercultural aspect, why it works. I mean, I think it's about convenience. And I mean the convenience to get everything delivered. And I mean, they were just great. And this is what generally Americans are great at. Innovation, being a daredevil, try new things, fail, get up and do it again, right? I mean, if you look at Amazon starting as a bookstore, failing, starting again as a marketplace, failing and going back. I mean, people from other cultures, they would have said, okay, I'm not made for that. So I think it's probably also to see what the world needs. And this is, I think, a globalization aspect.
Wow.
We need short deliveries. We need people who react to our needs. And I mean, COVID did the rest, right? I mean, everybody is basically ordering at Amazon. But on the other hand, Amazon has to follow the labor laws in the countries they are at. I mean, this was a big problem for Uber, for example. Uber couldn't get into Germany. Why? Because they say, no, 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 no. This is exploitation, what you're doing here. This is not treating people like fairly as an employee. And so really Uber had to work it out, and people had to get a license, because then there is a very strong taxi industry in Germany. And they said, no, not everybody can drive passengers. This is a safety issue. So you see all those global companies come and they adapt to the necessary. I mean, do they pay the taxes everywhere equally? I'm afraid not. They look for a place where it's cheaper, but still they have to play at least those labor law and law rules.
And I think that's the same in every country, most definitely including the United States. So
Yeah.
Amelie, now we're going into our next conversation, which is kind of this paradox that on the one hand, we spoke about Walmart and that they failed miserably because they didn't adhere to intercultural norms in Germany. On the other hand, Amazon can do whatever they want. They have people delivering packages on Sunday, which in conservative places in Europe was,
Yeah.
I mean, not possible a year ago. I mean, not even fathomable. So this is, on the one hand, you have that, no, that's not okay because you don't fit to what we do. On the other hand, you have, as you mentioned, the efficiency. You have these people saying, you're behind and I'm going to bring you up to speed and you're just going to have to follow along. So tell us about this whole idea of this principle of those global leaders, as we mentioned, the United States, then in the 20th century, through World War II, and now there's a different balance of power. But tell us about that whole idea of those stronger countries and the stronger cultures pushing around and influencing the other cultures and how that affects intercultural training today.
I mean, I think this is why intercultural training even exists, or the questions, because first was colonialization. And everybody took it for granted that some people are better and the others are worse. And then even we had like low class, right? I mean, it was a feudal system basically. And all the colonizers just went abroad with their cultural glasses on and just told people what is the right way to do things. And I mean, all the former colonized countries are fed up with that. Having people to tell them what is appropriate or inappropriate, just from their point of view. And this was also a thing. They never asked, why are you doing those things? They just came into the country and said, this, how you do it is wrong. I remember one thing with there is a custom of sati in India, where a widow would burn herself with her husband. So this was practiced historically for a long, long time. So the colonizers came and said, this is so cruel. How dare you? How can you? You have to stop this. But they never asked, why are you doing that? It was only then in the books and media, oh, how barbaric. Literature played a big role in colonialization. If you look at really popular literature, also English literature, the alien, the other, the bad one, it was always somebody from a different culture. And so people were so influenced by that. So people in Europe, they thought, oh yeah, they are lower than us. It's their culture is not equally balanced, equally good as ours. We are the good culture and we tell them. And now those structures are crumbling. I mean, now we have a lot of information, we have a lot of questions we can ask, everything can be formed in a new way. And this is what people want. And now for sure for us, I mean, American culture, European culture, who were so used to demand and tell people what is right. Now we're getting into that where we say, oh, wait a minute, we have to really look now closely what are other people expecting.
Fantastic. So I'd like to, at this moment, bring in Professor Lino Rivera of St. Mary's College of California. Hi, Lino.
Hello, Simeon. Hello,
Hi.
Amelie.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you here. I just have a follow-up question now on the point that you just brought up. How would these businesses or corporations or what you would call colonizers, how would they adapt to something that is very contrary to their concept of the way things are? If their culture, if there's a cultural clash, how would these corporations adapt or adjust to these cultures that are so contrary to their own perception of how life is lived?
This is a great question because this is the whole point of the intercultural training, right? I need to do a thorough research. I need to see what is it, what I have, what is the surroundings, what is the workforce, what is even, let's to trivial things. How is the electrical system working? How much energy can I use? Stuff like that, right? And then look at my corporate culture and see what is valid in that country. How could we benefit from each other? And I think this is, I mean, there was a change, right? It used to be called only international corporations or organizations. And then they started to see, oh, the terminology is not what it's supposed to be. And they went into these transnational companies. And what is a transnational company different? Basically, the subsidiary is taking more decisions can take more decisions on her own, which is a great thing because it used to be like that. You know, this is headquarters, they are leading it, and they tell the rest of the world how things work and how things get done. But if I'm a total different culture, I would need maybe a different leadership style. I would need a different team building style. I would need a different training, right? And so they found out more and more autonomy for the subsidiaries. And this is where me as an intercultural trainer, I come in, right? I train people to work and live abroad. And you can calculate roughly for a corporation, it's the triple of a salary of an employee to send this person abroad. Mm-hmm. And if this fails, it's a big loss, right?
Yes. Could you give us a specific example of what you're talking about?
A specific example, you mean in regarding?
A detailed example, because for me, yes, it's all very general principle that it's so good, okay, but can you give a specific example of the things that you're talking about?
Okay, a specific example. It used to be many times like this, that there were big misunderstandings. Let's take an example. A society functions and perceives certain things in a certain way. Let's say Latin America. Let's take, for example, Mexico, because lots of the car manufacturers, they went into Mexico to produce there. So a specific example would be, I'm a corporation, let's say from Germany. So time has a very big value. Everything is functioning on time. I have very specific evaluated processes that work perfectly in Germany. And I want to move, let's say, production to Mexico. First of all, I need to know that time is not perceived in the same way in Mexico as it is in Germany. In Germany, we train our kids from the beginning on. You have to be punctual. This is a sign of respect. The train is punctual in Germany. If I go to a house, even in private, I would calculate how much time do I need for the way, and then I will be 2 minutes before the party starts in front of the door and would ring the bell. If I do that in Mexico, people are like, why are you already here? Because time is more fluid, right? So I see that I have a workforce that maybe is not sharing this dimension exactly with me. So what can I do? Either I try to punish, right? I punish if you are not on time, or I see how can we manage? How can we handle that aspect? Do I maybe give a bonus to the people who manage being on time? Do I maybe put the frame of the deadline in a different way so that everybody is in? And those are the tiny things, because it used to be like that many times. If something did work, people just went there and said, so I go and clean up the mess. And they did not think about the fact that this is not the people from my home country I'm working with. They are educated in a different way. They even think in a different way. If you think about reasoning style, US, for example, is very linear. You have a goal, you go 2 steps back, say good enough, and you give it a shot. Then you have Germany, dialectical reasoning style, thesis, antithesis, synthesis, thesis, and so on. So what happens is there is not so much margin for error in the German reasoning style model. So error is something very bad. You try, and if you make a mistake, you didn't do the math, you didn't do a thorough analysis. Whereas in the US, it's not considered a bad thing. Like Apple says, right? Fail fast. And those are the things you really have to think about before you go as a company in a country. You need to see what is the workforce. What do they provide? What kind of education? What kind of reasoning style? Many things, right? There are many aspects. Are they more group oriented? Are they more transactional, more relationship based? And going from there, seeing each other. And I think this is, I don't know, is that what you were talking about when you wanted us?
Exactly. Amelie, that is exactly. You answered my question directly to the point. Thank you. Thank you.
Dr. Davis, you want to jump in?
Yeah, please. Hi. My
Hi.
name is Tom Davis. Excuse me, a little raspy. I'm sorry I was late, but it's very interesting what you're saying. I think one of the important points that people have to start to think about is adaptation. Adapt to the other person's or the other people's ideas, whether it be on a national basis or on a local basis, or between East and West, here right in the United States with what's going on politically. So if you're not willing to have an open mind and listen to the other side of the story, and then try to adapt your presentation so that they will understand it and appreciate it and work with you, you're not going to get any place.
Yeah,
but I do agree.
Great.
With what you said, 100%.
Yeah, it's a great point. And you know what? I mean, Milton Bennett, who was more or less a little bit of a founder of this whole intercultural training and research, and he developed a model, the DMIS, Developmental Model of Intercultural Sensitivity. And actually what you just said, adaptation is the last spot at becoming ethno-relative.
I'm sorry, what did you say? Adaptation is the last what?
It's the last point what we want to reach in being intercultural competent, to really change the perspective. I mean, it's a great observation, and this is what we are working with in this in the intercultural training. This is where we are heading to, right? And many times we are very in the ethnocentric stage, right? Only what I say is relevant, and it's a great example. What is happening in the US is exactly that, right?
Exactly.
Polarizing point of view and no bridges anymore. And this is what I try to do with my work, actually build bridges.
Fantastic. So, Amelie,
do you need an architect to build your bridges?
Absolutely. I can always need help.
So, Amelie, because we're running out of time, then can you go through us? If you take us, for example, maybe me or Dr. Davis or Lino, take us for kind of, if we came to you as clients, what are the first steps that you do with us in order to train us interculturally? So
the first steps is that I would send you a questionnaire about yourself, where you were raised, where you're born, what you consider your cultural background, because this helps you already to focus on things you maybe never thought about, right? and also what bothers you, any challenges you feel you're facing with a move. This would be the first thing. And then I would, and it depends where you're at, right? Meet the participant where he, she is at is very important. Some people already read a lot, some people traveled a lot, where traveling doesn't mean necessarily you're intercultural competent, because many times we see other cultures like, oh, isn't that cute? And we trivialize and we romanticize and we don't see the real thing, right? So I would examine a little bit, okay, where are you at and what is your main focus? And sometimes I have it that people tell me, oh, give me the do's and don'ts and I'm fine. And I say, well, I mean, there is a long list of do's and don'ts, but it will not change how you interact with the people. And it would not change your success in the country. I mean, do's and don'ts, daily living is a very important aspect too, right? Because you don't want to break laws when you go in a different country. For sure, I trained that too. But the first part is really being self-reflective. Realize what are my own cultural values. And this I usually do. Many times I work with tools like the Culture Wizard is one tool I'm working with, or Erin Meyer's Culture Map. The first one who actually developed something like this was Gerd Hofstede, and he worked already, I think it was in the 60s already, 70s, he started with IBM, and he did a big research about certain dimensions: leadership, masculine, feminine, collectivist versus individualist. And then I go with the participants over certain dimensions, like what I said before, hierarchy, egalitarian. Then I ask them, what is a good leader for you, for example, right? And then I see, where do they come from? Is it more paternalistic style they like? You know, like more I'm the subordinate, my leader tells me what to do? Or do they more like a player coach model, like it is in the US, right? And from there, I always relate that to the host culture they will go to and give them those examples, what I told you before with the roots of culture, why people are leading that way. How are people socialized and educated and why things are done in that way? Or time, is it more fluid? Is it more punctual? Interpersonal versus transactional, or motivation. Am I more work-life balance culture, or do I come from a more motivation-based background, right? Like in the US, the one who dies with the most toys wins. This is the American thing, right? Motivation is everything. And it's very simple. When you go to a party in the US, people will ask you, what do you do? They don't want to know if I like to ride my bike. No, they want to know what I work. When they know what I work, they know what I earn. Then the next question is, where do you live? Then they will know how much property tax I pay and how good is the school. And with those three simple questions, I know that. So this is typical for a status motivated culture. If I go to a more work-life balance or balanced culture, people want to know about you personally. Like, right, who is your family? How many kids do you have? Things like that, right? More. And again, this is not good or bad, but if you know about that, you can handle and manage in a different way. And as well, the aspect of time, what we said before, is so important. And I have so many expats, no matter where they come from. They come into the US and they're shocked when they go to the restaurant. Why? Because they eat and they're not even done, they get the check. So everybody has in mind, oh, most capitalist society in the world. Oh, they only want my money. Oh, they want to throw me out in order to get another person to the table. The background is Benjamin Franklin, time is money. Time is such a high value in the US. So the waiter who brings you your check first is the best waiter, because he says, I see you, I honor and value your time. It's the most valuable thing you have. That's why I bring you the check, and you can go on with your business. And once you know that, you will not be mad at the waiter anymore, because you know, oh, he's actually doing, from his point of view, a good thing.
If I may just jump in to support
that. Sure.
Okay, Amelie, I come from the Philippines and the culture is very different here.
Yeah.
I live in the United States. So for example, you go to a restaurant and you say, do you have gluten-free food, bread or whatever it is, or dairy-free, because I'm allergic to dairy or I'm allergic to gluten. The waiter will say, yes, we have all of that. And so you order the food and they give it to you. And guess what? It's not gluten.
It's gluten.
It has gluten, it has dairy, it has nuts, whatever that you're allergic to. And then you get mad. It's like, why is it that he lied to me? And it's not in our culture to say no. It's a disrespect.
Yeah.
He's not trying to lie to you or trying to harm you. It's like he wants to be respectful to you, that we're going to bring you whatever we have, whether it's gluten-free or not, because we don't want to say no.
Yeah.
So
and
that's a good example.
And this is such a good point, because I always use that in my programs to understand Asian cultures with this not saying no, with this respect, right? I mean, you go to a sushi shop in Japan and you say, I want a burger and a fries. Do you have that? They will say, oh, I will see what I can do for you. For the American, it's, oh yeah, they said, yes, I get my burger, right? And this is the thing, you need to know that before. And this is with direct and indirect communication, right? And you need to know that, because if you're leading a team in the Philippines or in Japan, you will have a hard time if you cannot decode the language and you cannot decode the cultural aspect behind the language. And this is so important. And again, if you know that, it's not about good or bad or right or wrong. You know, oh, I have to be cautious. It might say, and then I always tell the people in my training, you need to double check. You need to say, did I get that right? Will there be no gluten at all in this meal you're serving, or will there be gluten? So you give this open discussion and you have an interaction where you give the person the chance to say, I will bring you a meal and it will have gluten. So we're done, right? It's about how do I communicate this? Or also the speaking distance. I mean, I don't know how it's in the Philippines, but in Mexico, for example, people come very close when they talk to you.
Our sense of distance is you're talking to the person right here.
Yeah.
No sense of space at all.
Yeah, and that's for an American, this is the worst, because there is measurements, right? Like psychological research. There's measurements that the Americans have the widest speaking distance in the world. So if you come close, what will I do? I will back up because I want my comfortable speaking distance. And this is like dancing through a room. And at some point, the American will be with the back to the wall. And you need to learn to address those things. And this is also intercultural training. How do I address things and how do I notice things? And you can say, you know, probably you are used to speak closer. I'm not so comfortable. Can we stay in a little, nobody's mad at you. You will remind people, hey, I'm from a different culture. Oh yeah, right. Maybe this is different. And
Fantastic.
This is what we need to do constantly, to remind others and ourselves about that fact.
Yeah, and to add to that point too, we are huggers and
Yeah.
you know, kissers. But you know, here, like, well, why are you hugging me? I'm like, get away from me.
Absolutely.
So I have to adjust to that too when I came here.
Yeah, or you, and this is what very important. You are not going to a country, let's say you come to the US, you're not coming here to Americanize. You have to be in your comfort zone and level. And if hugging is a very important thing, just communicate it. Say, I'm a hugger. Is that okay for you? And you open up this exchange and the other person has the chance to say, well, no, I'm not so much of a hugger. Or the person says, oh, hugging, I didn't try it in a long time. Why not, right? And this is the thing. It's not that you need to assimilate what I said before, because this is the wrong way. And I mean, this is integration, right? Integration works only both ways. I can only be integrate if I'm actively integrated. And this is a communication process.
Fantastic. So we unfortunately are out of time. Last question, Amelie, what do you wish businessmen and women and all other men and women everywhere?
I wish that we all see the great thing that the global world provides to us, this possibility to see, learn from each other, and be open and see ourselves as cultural ambassadors wherever we go, and really have this thorough, deep exchange and try not to focus on challenges and negative, focus on what can we win from each other and really keep up a good communication.
Fantastic. So let's see how we can stay in touch with Amelie. Here is her contact information. It is on LinkedIn, Amelie Kreiter. So, and Amelie, people can reach out to you.
Yeah,
There's a kreiter.intercultural@gmail.com. They can send you an email if they want, ask you their questions.
absolutely.
Wonderful. Okay. So thank you so very much to Amelie Kreiter.
Thank you for having me.
So let's see what's coming up next week. We have here music and more in Bosnia and Herzegovina. Southeastern Europe is one of the few remaining areas of Europe yet to be inundated by commercial tourism, but it probably won't be that way for much longer. One city in particular, Trebinje, is sure to start figuring into everybody's travel plans. Tatjana Rankovic, a New York-based pianist, discovered Trebinje when she was looking for the right place to organize an international summer music festival. To find that place, she flew to Belgrade with her piano technician friend who recommended Trebinje as a possible location, drove by car across mountains and valleys of the Balkan Peninsula, documenting her trip with her camera. When she arrived at Trebinje, well, her photo tells the rest of the story. Since 2018, the city of 30,000 residents has welcomed Tatjana, the international faculty, students, and families of the Music and More Summerfest as musical diplomats, and the Summerfest has become a celebrated part of the city's cultural life. Let's get to know this incredible city and its high esteem for the Summerfest. Performances can be heard throughout the valley from a stage that overlooks the entire city. Come welcome Tatjana, composer Ionel Petroi, pianist, and her student Nox Oki, Simo Radic, historian at the Museum of Trebinje, and Dr. Jelena Putre, a public diplomacy professional, to our show, and let's get to know music and more in Bosnia and Herzegovina. As always, all information about upcoming shows may be found at www.simeonmoro.com. So once again, thank you so very much to Amelie Kreiter and to Professor Lino Rivera. Thanks to Dr. Jerome Davis, and to Agnieszka and Benoit Rivolet for their support of this show. Most of all, thanks to you, our participants who make it all worthwhile. From New London, New Hampshire, Detroit, Michigan, Plattsburgh, New York, and the Bay Area, California, goodbye, and see you next Wednesday.
Goodbye.